So really what meditation is doing, it is training you to become familiar with something, right? It's a technique of familiarizing your mind with something, right? So in the case of relaxation, right, meditation isn't just pulling relaxation from the air. It's teaching you to access this relaxed state that you have in you all the time, right? Just because you might not be relaxed in a specific moment doesn't mean that your ability to be relaxed and calm is gone. It's within you, and you can learn how to access it, and that's where meditation comes into play, right? So meditation is very similar to training our body to do something. So if we go to the gym, right? Now, if I went to the gym, I don't go to the gym. So if I went to the gym and you're like, hey, Keith, try to lift this weight, probably until I don't go to the gym, just by the way I'm talking about it, I would be like, oh, and I wouldn't be able to do it, right? Now, if I was determined enough and I was there and I trained a little bit each day, right? Maybe a couple breaks in between, but trained a little bit each day, what happens, right? My muscles become a little stronger. They become more familiar with doing these motions, and I'm able to lift the weight. And then I can train to lift more weights, right? So it's very similar to training your mind, right? The things that we're looking at training our mind to do are be more positive, like training our mind in patience, right? Instead of getting angry, or training my mind in gratitude, being appreciative for the things that we have, right? All these wonderful things. Let me catch up. Oh, Oz, you thought that was funny? Ivy, I know why my mind is always wandering off. I have both ADD and ADHD. It's just a matter of letting all the bullet trains of thought scream on past. Yeah, so this is a really good comment. Thank you. Our mind is always wandering off, right? It's always drifting. And it's gotten very good at doing that because we've let it get very good at doing that, right? Essentially, for however many years that we've been around, we've let our mind do whatever it wants. So our mind is very familiar with drifting, right? Our mind is not that familiar with obeying our commands. So that's part of our training, is to kind of tilt the scales in the other direction, right? So in order to do things like that, in order to familiarize our mind with whatever it is that we want to familiarize it with, we do first need to learn how to relax a little bit, right? And the reason is that our mind is very busy, just kind of like Ivy said. Our mind is wandering all the time, right? Think about this. Worry about this. Be happy about that. Be upset about that, right? Like, it seems like we don't really have a lot of say in what our mind is doing. So we have to kind of declutter our mind a bit, right? And the analogy I love to use for this is if you imagine that you're at a lake, right? Beautiful little lake. You went on a hike. Good for you. And it's a beautiful day. There's no wind. There's no rain or anything like that, right? And you're staring at the reflection in the lake, and boy, that reflection is very clear, right? You could describe exactly what you see in the reflection of that lake pretty easily, right? Now, if it starts to rain a little bit, wind picks up, causes some ripples on the surface of the lake, what happens, right? Not as clear. The reflection isn't as clear. You might be able to see a little bit, right? But not as clear as when there was no raindrops, right? And if it really starts to downpour, you might not be able to see the reflection on the lake at all. So our mind normally, by default, is the still lake. Very calm, very peaceful, very cool and collected, right? Thinking reasonably about our problems. But all of the kind of bombardment of thoughts and stress and anxieties that are going on in our mind all day long, these are like raindrops that are falling on the surface of our mind. And it's making it hard for us to access that calm, peaceful state. It's in there, but sometimes it can be difficult to access it, right? And so our first step of meditation is to learn how to clear away some of those raindrops, to access that peaceful mind state. And then we can use that peaceful mind state to think about something, contemplate, become familiar, right? Captain Oz, I keep forgetting I can't use the other emotes on here. Twitch, it is not. Okay, cool. Does that make sense? Hopefully. I know it's like a super abbreviated crash course, but the way we're going to do this, right? The way we're going to relax our mind with meditation is something that's called single-pointed concentration. Fancy. All that means focusing on one thing, right? Easier said than done, right? Why? Because our mind is used to multitasking. Our entire lives are multitasking, right? We are very familiar with multitasking. So we have to not multitask here, right? The goal is that we're going to focus so exclusively on one thing, single-pointedly concentrating on one thing, that all the other thoughts, they're going to start to fade away a little bit. Sort of like if you've ever been in the zone, right? Like at work, working on like a chart or something like that, right? Really diligently. What happens? You lose track of time. You don't hear people call your name. All the noises in the office, not as distracting, right? It's like they're gone, right? So we're going to do this intentionally by using our breath as the object of our meditation, right? So we're going to focus so exclusively on our breath that all the other stress, anxieties, they're going to fade away just a little bit. We're going to clear them out a little bit, and we're going to relax. Sound good? Sounds peaceful to me. Ivy Rose, hi from Metro Denver area. Hello, fellow Coloradan. I'm in Idaho Springs, that little town you pass by when you go to the mountains. Okay, sound good? Let's do it. We're going to do about a 5-minute breathing meditation, right? And maybe you've heard of breathing meditation before. It's not that uncommon. But the reason that we use our breath is because you have your breath with you all the time. Great. So if you get used to doing this, right, and it works for you, you start to feel empowered that you can do this whenever you need to, right? We don't need special circumstances or conditions or, perfect quiet or to retreat to a cave or anything like that. We don't need to do that. All we need is our breath and just a little bit of patience, right? Cool. So sit comfortably. All right, step number 1, you're going to sit comfortably. If you're in a chair, that's cool, like me. If you're sitting on the floor, that's also great. If you're laying down, that's fine too. Doesn't really matter. Doesn't matter. There's no perfect way to sit, to orient yourself. Just make sure you're comfortable, right? Okay. And you can go ahead and close your eyes. We're going to do about a 5-minute breathing meditation. I'm going to guide us, so you just follow along with what I'm saying and enjoy relaxing. All right, here we go. Whenever we start a meditation, the first thing we always do is check in with ourselves. How are you feeling right now? Are you happy? Are you sad? Are you tired? Energetic? Whatever it is, it does not matter. All that matters is you notice. Begin to take an interest in what your mind is up to. This is called mindfulness, a word you probably have heard before. Mindfulness is quite simply an active awareness of your thoughts, moment to moment, for the purpose of being able to skillfully respond to those thoughts. So just note how you're feeling right now. And having done that, you can now turn your full attention to your breath, breathing in and out of your nose. Very gentle breaths, very natural breaths. You do not need to take big, deep inhales or forcefully exhale the air. Just breathe normally in and out. See if you can follow your entire breath in. See if you can follow your entire breath out. Breathing in and out very gently and very naturally. And at some point, you may notice that your attention drifts a bit, and it's no longer exclusively focused on your breath. Maybe you're thinking about something that happened earlier in the day, or something coming up later after class. Whenever you notice that this has happened, just gently guide your attention back to breathing. Make a choice to put your full attention back on breathing in and out through your nose very gently and very naturally. Allow yourself to relax. Allow yourself to enjoy sitting here in this moment, breathing in and out, very gently and very naturally. Keep bringing your attention back to your breath whenever you notice that it has drifted. This process of choosing to focus single-pointedly on your breath, noticing when your attention drifts, and being able to bring your attention back to your breath, that is meditation. You are meditating right now. You are training your mind to relax, to be calm, to access its natural happy state. And you're doing it all on your own, with nothing other than your breath. How wonderful. What a good use of your time. So just continue to breathe in and out gently, naturally for a little while longer. Enjoy sitting here. Okay, and when you're ready, you can open your eyes. How'd that go? Easy? Hard? Right? So one thing that was worth mentioning is a lot of times we think the point of meditation is to never think about anything else, right? To just kind of block everything out and never have our mind drift, right? But your mind thinks. That's what your mind does. It's an indication that it's working. So the goal isn't to never have your mind drift, but rather to be aware enough to notice when it has and being able to bring it back. All right. So it's a subtle difference there, but I think it's worth mentioning because sometimes we think, oh no, my mind drifted. Your mind's gonna drift. My mind drifts all the time, right? So it's more about being able to catch it early on, which we're going to talk about a lot today, and bring it back, right? So hopefully that was relaxing, right? Maybe if this is your first time, you're like, wow, that was a little more difficult than I thought. Why? Well, when's the last time you did this? When's the last time you're like, I'm going to focus on my breathing and nothing else, and I'm going to bring my attention back to breathing whenever it drifts? Never. We've never done that before. And so we are not familiar with that, right? Just like we weren't familiar with how to drive a car a long time ago, and it was challenging. And now we can drive while shaving and doing all this other crazy stuff, right? Because driving comes naturally to us because we're familiar with it. So this process, meditation, is going to become more natural the more you do it, right? Just like anything else, right? Everything in your life that you do now with regularity is done with regularity and ease because you're familiar with it. Brushing your teeth, tying your shoe, all these things, right? So meditation is no different, right? It just takes a little practice, right? Ivy, we are human beings, not human doings. Oh, I like that. That's cool. Captain Oz, a bit too relaxing. What are you going to sleep over there? That's okay. If you find you're getting sleepy, it's very common. Essentially, we don't want to go to sleep when we're meditating because it's sort of like an active kind of thing. But it's not the worst thing that could happen, right? You get some sleep out of it. Okay. So any questions on meditation or breathing meditation or any of the things that I talked about? I know it's a pretty fast introduction, but hopefully that gave you some sort of a baseline as to what meditation even is. So any questions on any of that before I move on? And we will be moving on to our topic for today. And our topic is all about understanding your own mind. Captain Dust, to be first, nearly 2 a.m. Oh, I forgot you're UK. You better go to bed. It can be even done as a mini meditation as a red light. Yeah, so this is, and I'm glad you brought that up, because the goal here isn't to just kind of once in a while sit down and meditate. We want to get creative about how we can start to incorporate some of the things that we're going to learn here in our life. And one of the convenient parts of breathing meditation is all you need is your breath, and you have that. Hopefully, otherwise you have bigger problems than meditating. So yeah, like if you're stuck at a red light and you want to meditate for a little while, cool, but be safe. Be safe. I don't usually recommend any sort of driving with meditation, but walking, right? Eating, like all these things that we do all day, we can start to incorporate some meditation techniques into them. So good idea. Okay, so let's talk about our mind. Boop, boop, boop. That's my mind sound. I don't know why. So do you understand your own mind? It's an interesting question to start off with, right? I like to think to some extent, right? Oh, Rosa, great question. How to best use meditation to cope with COVID-19? Whoa. So this is a really deep topic. So one of the things that has been really challenging with COVID is it has disrupted some of the things that we consistently would do to find happiness, right? Whether that's going out with our friends or eating or whatever, right? Socializing, right? And so this is a good opportunity to think about, okay, well, is that where happiness comes from, right? Or is there another aspect of happiness that maybe I can start to train in now? So it's a very long class I would teach about that specifically, Rosa. But meditation, in terms of dealing with uncertainty, things that are going on in our life, we can use it to just kind of relax a little bit, sort of like with breathing meditation, right? Just create a little space, right, to just kind of settle in. Or we can then go a step further and start to analyze some things. That's called contemplation. We're going to do a little bit of that here, right? So meditation is really good for relaxing and also investigating, right? So maybe you want to start to think about, well, what is it about all these things that I miss that makes me happy, right? It's an interesting thing to think about. Captain Oz, I like thinking of crashing waves whenever I meditate in the past. Helps calm my mind. Waves are a very common visualization for meditation, right? Consistent, right? Consistent flow of water, but sometimes they're big, sometimes they're small. Kind of a good analogy of life, right? Sometimes very peaceful, sometimes not, chaotic, right? But all part of the ocean, all part of our life, right? It is the stop and take a few breaths with intention focus meditation. Good. Awesome. Great comments today. Love it. Okay, so let's talk about our mind, right? So I like to think that we understand our own mind to some extent, right? Like, we kind of know, like, I get angry when insert thing that makes us angry, or I get anxious when I have to speak in public, right? or something like that, right? So we're aware of the symptoms, obviously, doesn't feel good, and we also think we're kind of aware of the cause, right? But the interesting thing about this is for the cause of what is upsetting our mind, we don't really look too deep, right? We just kind of look at the surface level, right? I get angry when this happens. So when this happens, it's bad, right? That's kind of how we think, right? So meditation is about relaxing, right? But also it's about doing a deeper exploration into how our mind works, so we can understand how our mind works moment to moment, right? So let's take the example of getting anxious when we have to speak in public, right? Very common, right? So I get anxious when I have to speak publicly, right? And so then we think speaking publicly is scary. Speaking publicly is the issue, right? And so what do? We avoid speaking in public, right? We're like, well, I'm not doing that. That's the issue. So if I just don't do that, I'll be good to go, right? But it doesn't always work, because sometimes you have to sleep. You have to speak in public, sleep in public. So meditation kind of challenges us to look at a situation like this a little deeper, right? What is it about speaking in public that makes you anxious, right? Why? And we can think, was it always like this, right? Were you always nervous to kind of speak in front of others? What about when you were a kid? I don't know, too many kids like that. They're very happy to tell you what they're thinking, right? They don't mind speaking in public at all, right? So even from this little kind of thought process here, we can see that we can go a little deeper, right? We can see that our maybe fear of public speaking, it was developed over time, right? We weren't kind of inherently afraid of it, right? It was something that was learned over time, right? Through becoming familiar with public speaking equals scary, right? So even that's really is a really cool insight that we can get by just taking some time to think about the situation, right? Ivy, rivers, brooks, waterfalls, and water fountains are proven to help calm the mind and ease meditation. Water is a great visualization, right? We're going to do a little visualization later. I don't think I was doing water, but yeah, great point. Okay, so we're going a little deeper. That's where I'm getting at, right? So we kind of understand that these unhappy thoughts, they have developed, right? We know, we're like, okay, I'm angry, or I'm anxious, or I'm jealous. But we generally don't understand how they came to be, right? We think we do, but if we go a little deeper, we might be a little kind of like, I don't know what's going on here, right? So that's what we're going to look at today, right? And why is this important? This is, I always like to kind of talk about, like, why do you even want to do this? Why should you dedicate time to going deeper, right? To thinking more about your problems like this, right? So understanding comes from recognizing, right? Recognition is the key to solving our problems, right? In order to take action on our thoughts, we have to recognize that they're happening, right? And more specifically, we have to start to recognize our thought process, right? When we're getting angry, getting anxious, getting jealous, we have to start to recognize that earlier on in the process, right? Because right now, it seems like we're okay, then something happens, and not okay, angry, right? There doesn't seem to be a lot of in between, right? But there are some things in between that we can kind of look at, right? So I like to just kind of mention this example of, if you think about like a fire, so if there's a fire, right? It starts as a little flame. If you happen to be standing there, you pour a little bucket of water on the flame, and you're good. No fire, right? But if you're not there, if you're not aware that there's been a flame that sparked, what happens? The fire spreads, right? Sort of like a forest fire, right? So this is how our mind works with like anxiety and anger and jealousy and all these kind of negative mind states. If we can catch them early enough, they're easier to manage. But if we don't catch them, they start to spread and fester, and they kind of solidify themselves, and it becomes more difficult. So our goal is to catch our mind in the act, right? Instead of after it's Done the act. Okay. Lizzie from Texas. Many beautiful spots to just breathe. Yeah, take advantage of the beautiful environment, right? Really, really good. Really good. Okay, cool. Okay, so that's kind of why we want to do this, right? We want to be able to start to recognize our thought process earlier on so we can deal with these feelings more constructively, right? So essentially we have to take an interest in our mind. We have to take an interest in what it's doing moment to moment. Now, like I said, this may seem difficult because doesn't seem to be a lot of in between, right? We're okay, then we're anxious. We're okay, then we're angry, right? It doesn't seem to be a lot going on in the middle. Our mind is just going from okay to not okay, right? Constantly. Right? But there are some things that we can kind of look at and analyze to see the thought process that our mind goes through, right? So that's what we're going to do today, right? So we're going to, does that make sense? Is that cool? Is that cool? Hopefully that's interesting or thought-provoking. That's really kind of what we're after, is just to be like, oh, that's interesting to think about, because then what's going to happen is you're going to think about it, right? And when you think about something, what happens? It becomes more familiar to you. Okay, cool. Very cool. Okay, so we're going to focus on kind of negative thoughts, because those are the ones that we really want to get rid of, right? So how do negative thoughts develop? Right. So what's the first thing that happens? Right. So you're totally okay. You're sitting on your chair, right? Having a great old time. And then, I don't know, you get anxious or angry or something. What happens? What happens? Right. What's the first step? Something happens. That's the first step. The first step is something happens, right? Basically, we call this stage contact. So you come into contact with something, right? Or someone, right? Or maybe just a thought, and that thought makes you angry or anxious or jealous or whatever, right? There's a million different things that we feel. Lonely, right? So we come into contact with something. It can be physical. It can be visual. It can be through hearing, auditory. I think that's the fancy way of saying it, right? And it can also just be a thought, right? It can just be a thought. Right? Now, the interesting thing about this step 1, contact, is that it is 100% completely unavoidable, right? Like, we can't stop our mind from thinking. Right? Thoughts. Sometimes our mind's going to think about something that happened in the past that we didn't like. Sometimes our mind's going to think about something coming up that we're anxious about, right? We can't stop that, right? Yet, this is kind of where we try to solve the issue, right? So, like we were saying before, if you maybe have a fear of speaking in public, what happens? You try to not speak in public. You try to sever this kind of negative feeling at the contact level. And sometimes this provides temporary relief, right? If you had to, maybe you had to go to a party or something like that. Maybe it's I'm using anxiety a lot, but it can be anger or anything. But maybe you had to go to like a party, you have some social anxiety about it, right? You're like, I'm just not going to go, right? So then you don't go. And what happens? I feel so much better. I'm so glad I didn't go. That's great, right? But there's always going to be another social event that you have to go to, right? So what, are you just going to never go to anything ever? That's going to cause a whole nother slew of problems, right? So sometimes severing these things at the contact stage provides temporary relief, but we're kind of tricking ourselves into thinking that this is a healthy way of dealing with anxiety or anger, right? But it's temporary, right? So we want to see if we can go a little deeper than that, right? So what happens next? You're sitting down, maybe you think about something that is coming up later that's making you anxious, right? That's contact, right? We come into contact with a thought. And then now what? Are we just anxious or angry? It seems that way, right? It seems like, okay, we came into contact with something and now, okay, I'm anxious or angry, right? But there's something that happens first, right? Our mind thinks, ooh, that's not good, right? We have to think that, right? So our mind is like, whoa, that's worrisome, or that's unpleasant, that thought. Or if we maybe come into contact with something physical that we don't like I talked a lot about here on, I had like a kind of phobia about itching. So I would have an itch, right? An actual physical sensation. And I'd be like, whoa, that's not good. I don't like that, right? So essentially our mind is forming a link. Our mind forms links all day long. So our mind is forming a link by labeling this thing we've come into contact with as not good, right? Negative. Essentially, there's three kind of feelings that we have: positive, negative, and neutral, right? We like it, we don't like it, or we're like, we're indifferent to it, right? So in this case, we're kind of forming a negative link, right? And this really brings about that word again, familiarity, right? Because what happens when you do something a lot? Right? We mentioned this before, right? It starts to come naturally to you, right? It starts to come easy to you, like riding a bike, right? Riding a bike at first, very difficult. Now, if you've been riding a bike for, umpteen years, I was like, go ride down the street on your bicycle. You just go do it. You don't think about it, right? It's starting to come natural to you. This works with negative mindsets too, right? So let's use the public speaking example again, right? So we think about this thing this presentation we have to make, and it's getting us anxious. We're like, okay, presentation equals bad. I don't like it. Public speaking equals bad, right? And then the next time we have to do that, we have the same thought. And the next time we have to do that, we have the same thought. And now our mind is creating this link between public speaking equals anxiety, right? Or public speaking equals bad, right? Because we're doing it over and over again, right? So this stage is called negative association. That's just what I call it. You can call it whatever you want, but that's happening, right? We just think about it logically. Like, yeah, our mind has to kind of label this thing as bad for us to think of it as bad, right? So after that, what happens, right? Usually we start to exaggerate. This is a stage I call exaggeration. So this is kind of when we go down the whole rabbit hole of thoughts. The biggest trick is to try to be mindful in the moment. Yes. So a lot of what we talk about here is recognizing how our mind is either always kind of thinking about the past or always kind of thinking about the future. And that's where we kind of get trapped, right? So being, starting to take an interest in living in the moment is very helpful. It makes us happier, right? Very good. So stage 3, right? We have contact, negative association, and then exaggeration. And what's happening here is we're ruminating. Do you know what that word is? Rumination, right? It's when we think about something over and over again, right? Sort of like we have a GIF or a GIF, whichever one you like to call it, right? It's like a little loop, right? And we keep thinking about this thing that's coming up or this situation that happened, right? And we just keep thinking about it. And every time we think about it, we start to kind of feel it's even worse than we thought, right? We start to go down the rabbit hole of what if, right? So let's use the public speaking thing. What if I say something stupid, right? What if I, embarrass myself, right? What if I lose my place in my speech, right? And we start like, oh, then if I lose my place in my speech, then my boss is in the audience. They're going to think I'm, not capable of doing this. I'm not going to get that promotion. Like we go down this rabbit hole of thoughts, right? And we start to exaggerate the ramifications of this thing, right? Sort of like replaying a scene in our mind again and again, right? And what this does is it solidifies that negative mental link. It solidifies that negative association, right? We're like, not only is public speaking bad, but it's even worse than I thought. It's a feedback loop, Ivy. Great. That's a really great way of describing it, right? We're like, it's even worse than I thought, right? And so while kind of severing things at the contact level doesn't really work long term, and while maybe identifying a negative association is kind of difficult because our mind just kind of makes these links, this stage, exaggeration, is really where we can start to do some work, where we can start to kind of cut things off before it progresses, right? So this is where we really should try to focus our attention. Negative association and exaggeration are sometimes referred to as inappropriate attention. Just like a fun little phrase you can think of, right? So this is our key step to identify, right? Now, what happens after this? Well, then we entered into a stage I call wishing away, right? Where we develop kind of anger, aversion, anxiety, right? Basically, we're like in panic mode or fight mode, and we don't really know what to do. We just kind of react, right? So this stage, which I call wishing away, is really it's based in a lack of acceptance, right? This shouldn't be happening. And if you want to go even deeper, this shouldn't be happening to me, right? The whole me is kind of an interesting component of our anxiety and anger and stuff like that, right? Like if somebody else was speaking in public, we're not like, man, they must be really nervous right now, you know? Like we don't really like think about all those things, you know? But when we have to do it, like, oh no, right? So this stage is kind of when anger, anxiety, jealousy, it's developed, it's manifested, right? And then we have a feeling of helplessness, right? We don't know what to do, right? This is when, to use that analogy of the forest fire has grown. Each one of these steps, the forest fire is growing a little bit, right? Don't should on yourself. These are great. That's great. So our goal today, right, and your homework going forward is to start to see if you can pick out these different stages in some of the negative feelings you're having, right? So if you're getting anxious, right, if you notice that you're getting anxious, okay, well, did I come into contact with something? Yes. Does my mind think this is positive, negative, or neutral? Negative. So it's made a kind of link. It's made like a mental link, right? Have I been ruminating on this, right? Am I exaggerating maybe a little bit some of the ramifications of this, right? And then, do I don't want this to happen, right? This shouldn't be happening to me. Has that thought come up? Like, this shouldn't be happening. Why is this happening, right? So the important thing is to take an interest in what your mind is doing throughout the day, right? So you can start to see these different steps, because the more time we take to think about this, the easier it's going to become for us to identify these steps, right? And then maybe we can catch ourselves in the exaggeration phase, right? And we can put out that forest fire of anger, jealousy, anxiety sooner, right? We can manage it more easily, right? That's the goal. So what I always suggest for practicing this, is to set yourself a little alarm. This is going to be your little check-in, your self check-in, right? So when this alarm goes off, all you're going to say is, how am I feeling? How have I been doing for the last couple minutes, right? Where has my mind been, right? And then if we're like, I've been a little upset, right? What stages have I gone through? Let's think about this. Let's look a little deeper. Let's break it down, right? So basically, we want to start to get used to analyzing our thoughts. That way we can deal with them skillfully. Mindfulness. That's what mindfulness is, right? Cool? Does that make sense? Hopefully. So I want to do a little meditation now. That is going to, it'll start similar. We'll do a little breathing meditation. Then we're going to do a little visualization. And the goal here is to practice recognizing when our mind is kind of going off somewhere and then being able to bring it back, right? Because this is really important, right? And we talked a lot about this earlier, but step one is we have to learn how to relax ourselves a little bit so we can then look at and analyze some of these things, right? Cool. Ready. If Rob's ready, we're ready to go. Okay, cool. So you can sit comfortably once again. If you did not like your last seating arrangement, go ahead and change that. Put a little cushion under you, or I don't know, recline slightly more in your lazy boy. Okay. And you can go ahead and close your eyes. We're going to do a breathing meditation and then a short visualization. Okay. Let's once again just check in with ourselves. How are you feeling now? Different than before? The same? Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. All that matters is you notice. Begin to notice what your mind is up to moment to moment. We now know why we're doing this. We're training in mindfulness so that we can recognize negative thoughts popping up in our mind earlier on in the process and deal with them more skillfully. So having checked in, you can now turn your full attention once again to your breath, breathing in and out of your nose very gently and very naturally. In and out. See if you can follow the air as it enters your nose with each in-breath, sits for a moment, and then exits. Follow the air in and out of your nose as you begin to relax into your chair or cushion. Breathing in and out very gently and very naturally. And we can do a check-in once again. Where is your mind right now? Has it drifted a bit? Is it thinking about something that happened earlier? Something coming up later? If so, we can just say to ourselves, not right now. And then bring our attention back to breathing in and out. We're making a choice to focus on our breath. Following each moment of each breath in and out. As you begin to relax even further into your chair or cushion. Sometimes when we begin to focus on our breath single-pointedly, truly focus in, we start to notice some things about breathing that maybe we hadn't noticed before, some hidden features. Maybe we notice that the air feels cool, temperature-wise, each time we breathe in. And how that same air feels warmer each time we breathe out. How interesting. We're going deeper. Maybe we are noticing how our shoulders move with our breath. They rise each time we breathe in. They fall each time we breathe out. Our chest expanding, contracting. Our entire body moving, being a participant in breathing in and out. How interesting. We're going deeper, analyzing our breath at a deeper level. And we're finding some subtle joys about breathing in the process. You're beginning to enjoy sitting here breathing. How wonderful. How wonderful that you can enjoy something as simple as breathing in and out, gently and naturally. So now I'd like to do a short visualization to help reinforce this feeling of mindfulness, which is really important for us being able to recognize our thoughts early on in the process. So I'd like you to imagine that you are sitting under a tree. What does that tree look like? You're in a park all by yourself. There's nobody around, and you're sitting under this tree. Your back is leaning against the trunk of the tree. What does the bark feel like on your back? Just imagine it. And you're sitting here under this tree, and you're looking at the sky, blue, boundless sky, and noticing some of the clouds that are in the sky. You're focusing on the beautiful sky. Just imagine it. Every once in a while, a leaf from the tree you're sitting under will fall onto your lap. Usually when this happens, we would divert our attention away from the sky and focus instead on the leaf. Our attention would be distracted. But instead, I'd like you to imagine you just pick up the leaf and put it next to you, and then go back to focusing on the sky. Soon another leaf may fall, vying for your attention. Instead of letting our mind wander to it, we just gently move the leaf aside. It doesn't matter how many leaves fall. Your goal is to just notice when the leaf has fallen and put it off to the side, and then go back to enjoying sitting under the tree, watching the beautiful sky. Okay, and when you're ready, you can open your eyes. Return from your tree. Unless you're sitting under a tree right now, which you might be, I have no idea. If so, that was probably very easy for you to visualize. So we can use a lot of different techniques in meditation, right? So right there, we're doing like visualization, but what? It's the same exact thing, right? We're doing a visualization to visualize what we were talking about with breathing meditation, right? So when we're doing breathing meditation, right, We are choosing to focus on our breath, noticing when our attention has drifted. It's thinking about something that's coming up later, something coming up, or something that happened earlier, right? And we're noticing that and just bringing our attention back to breathing. That's meditation, right? Now, in this example, right, we were just using our imagination. We're sitting under a tree. We're looking at the sky. So we're making a choice. I'm going to look at the sky, right? So we're looking at the sky. Little leaf falls, right? And instead of shifting our focus, we're like, okay, move it to the side and go back to looking at the sky. It's the exact same thing. So we're essentially training our mind to become familiar with focusing on one thing. That is the whole technique of meditation, right? Because when we focus on one thing, we start to get some insight into it. We start to see it from a lot of different angles, right? So for a good first step for you, if this is your first time, is to start to practice this a little bit. See if you can start to get used to focusing on one thing, even just for a couple moments. Like sometimes when we're learning meditation, we're like, oh, I can't meditate. Well, like I don't have an hour to do this. No, you don't need an hour, right? How's a minute in the morning? How's 30 seconds? It does not matter how long you do it as long as you're doing it consistently. That's what's going to lead to you getting some familiarization with it. Cool? All right. Sounds good. That's all I got for you today. All right. So if you did enjoy this class, first of all, I'm happy that you did. Thank you for being here. I love teaching. I couldn't do it without you guys. What happened to my hand? I broke my wrist mountain biking. True Colorado activity there. So if you did enjoy this class, come back. We do this every week unless I have something to do, which I had to do last week, but I'll be back next week. That's over now, right? Come on back. We talk about a new topic each week. And you can also subscribe to my YouTube channel, which is super helpful for me. And then right next to the little subscribe button is a little bell. And if you tap that, then you get notifications anytime that I'm going live with a meditation. So, maybe you're having a busy Wednesday. Probably happens a lot, right? And you're like, oh, I forgot to meditate, right? You'll get a little notification. It'll be like, oh, it's meditation time. And hopefully you're able to join us, right? If not, all these videos are available on my YouTube channel, so you can watch them at your convenience. And I also offer one-on-one meditations, right? So if you're like, oh, this is really cool, I'd love to kind of explore this more, right? I do one-on-one virtual guided meditations, and these are really great for us being able to look at something particular to your life, right? So like, maybe I talked a lot about public speaking today for whatever reason. Maybe you don't have a problem with that, right? So if we're working one-on-one, we can focus on specifics of your life, which is really helpful, I think. All right, cool. Let me catch up on the comments. Carol, thank you. Thank you for always being here. Cynthia, thank you. You enjoyed the session. I'm really happy about that. Thank you. Ellen, VIP Ellen, great learning experience. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Patrick, your presentation style is more casual than what I'm used to. I live in Australia. Yet what you say makes a huge amount of sense. I guess this shows the importance of ignoring the superficial. Well, I'm glad you brought that up because I have been training and teaching meditation for a number of years, like over 10, 12 years. And a lot of the teachers I've had, right, sometimes they seem a little out there, right? And sometimes that puts people off, but like meditation is not some weird thing. It's just thinking, and so my whole point with starting this channel and meditation breaks, which is the business that I formed, is to do exactly that, to make this accessible, right? I'm just a normal guy. As much as I would like to be like some celebrity, just a normal guy, right? But I think that's cool, right? We can identify with that, right? Lizzie, thank you. Thank you for being here. LD Dell, this is your second time, and I really enjoy your session. See you next week. Thank you for that. I'm glad you've been enjoying them. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Like I said, I could not do this without you guys. I love teaching, so thank you for giving me that opportunity, right? Have a great week. Good luck with your mindful check-ins. Remember, set that check-in alarm, right? And good luck with meditation. And I'll catch you next week. We'll talk about something else. All right? Take care.